Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for coming on to the HMO podcast.
Oh, thank you, Andy. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
It's great to have you here. Emma, you're quite a big character in the kind of our industry. I see a lot of your stuff on social media. You're really well respected, and I'm particularly excited to bring you on the show today because you're doing a workshop for us inside the HMO roadmap. So I think you're going to tell us a little bit about what that workshop is going to entail. So at the end of today's podcast, I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that. But I'm sure lots of our listeners already know you, Emma, know about Pedersen Smith, but for perhaps some of our listeners who don't know you quite so well yet, could you tell us about your business and kind of who you are and what you're doing?
Hi. So thank you for the intro, Andy. So I'm Emma Smith. I'm a qualified architect and also a property investor, kind of slash developer. So I'm one half of Pedersen Smith alongside my partner, Mikkel. We invest in our own projects, so HMOs, flips, and buy-to-let projects. Most recently, I guess, focusing more on the flip projects. We also, I guess I should say, we also are serial home renovators. So we're in our second live-in home renovation, which is proved, I guess, challenging with a baby of now 9 months. In addition to kind of, I guess, our own homes, our own projects, we also take on client projects through our architecture company. So that's anything that falls under the umbrella of residential. So it might be a homeowner project to HMO conversions, to commercial to resi conversions, flat conversions, those sorts of projects. And I guess with our background in obviously being an architect, everything we do is focused around design. So we really want to maximise properties through design. And yeah, I think that's pretty much sums me up.
Well, it's really interesting to hear you kind of talk about what you're currently doing with your businesses, Emma. And I don't know, for me personally, I often think about architects and I think about big schemes and huge residential schemes and mixed use schemes. And actually, after talking to you, it's really interesting to hear how passionate you are about smaller projects and making best use of space. And I think one of the first questions I've got for you is, is that perhaps why you've started to lean into HMOs, or is there another reason completely?
So I think that was so. I guess my background before starting Pedersen Smith was I actually have worked on the larger schemes. So before I've worked on schemes like with a GDV of £1 billion in Chelsea, like
Wow.
huge master planning projects. Same as Macau, like £300 million GDVs. Down to £30 million private houses. So I guess I've had a full breadth of experience. So, but for me, I find whilst I guess to outsiders working on those type of projects to HMO conversions probably seem massively different. I actually think the concept of space and optimizing space is still fundamentally the same. So I think I guess in a kind of a weird way, I think I'm slightly obsessed with how people use space. So I'm kind of really intrigued how people use it. If there's more efficient ways of doing things, and yeah, I think it can. Yeah, depending on what scale you're at, space is space, and it always needs to be optimized. And I guess the way we focus more on HMOs is, I guess that was naturally led by our own projects. So when I first started our architecture company, I was probably predominantly working on homeowner projects, but then obviously we were investing ourselves, which naturally meant that more investors kind of saw the work we were doing and then came to us, which I guess, so we've naturally kind of specialized further and further into more HMO and investor projects, kind of, I guess, going to the small to medium sized property investors. Um,
And we're going to talk about one of your case studies today, aren't we? Actually, we're going to talk
yeah.
about one of your very own HMOs, which is a case study that's available inside the HMO roadmap, and I've seen it already, and it's an incredible case study, and the attention to detail, is really clear, and actually some of the numbers are quite substantial as well. So I'm really excited to talk to you about that. But um, is HMOs part of your long-term plan? Is it something that you, Mikhail, foresee in your kind of future from a financial point of view? And are you looking to scale up your own HMO portfolio alongside building your architectural practice?
Yeah, so I guess we've always, right from the start, we've always kind of seen two parallel companies that kind of work hand in hand. So our own projects and then for clients. In terms of HMO, so the project in this case study was our very first investment project. So we'd done our own home renovation before that, obviously working on client projects in other architecture practices. But I guess kind of from that project, we then moved to a buy-to-let next, which we were going to make a serviced accommodation before Corona hit. And then we made it a flip. And then most recently it's flip project. So I guess our strategy, it's not a sole HMO strategy. We're, in a way, when we look at a building, we see what that building wants to be and how we can best maximise it. So I think, I wouldn't say we definitely wouldn't build just a HMO portfolio, because also with our long-term goals, Mikkel's actually from Denmark. So we want to be able to split our time between England and Denmark, and we also both enjoy traveling. So our plan is to be able to travel loads. So in terms of how intensive the management is, I think we'll always go down a very mixed portfolio route. With the kind of next projects we'll be taking on will be for ourselves, will be a larger property into flats. So you're kind of getting that hybrid of multiple streams of income from one property, but with less management.
And I suppose having skills like yours, it's possibly a little bit easier to see those opportunities. I know certainly from my point of view, I'd love to do more projects like that, but often actually find it quite difficult to see those buildings and envision how it could work. And the numbers are often quite different, whereas the 4 and 5 and 6 bed HMOs and the mid terraces and the terraces and the semis, I really understand well, and often find that as soon as I venture beyond that, I very quickly get into comfortable ground and have to reach out to people like yourself for advice and things like that. But do you feel quite comfortable in that case, just looking at a broad variety of projects? Can you kind of lend your hand to anything?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of exactly that. So I guess when we did our first HMO, we kind of skipped the buy-to-let stage initially because we wanted to do something more with the design. And then for the larger projects, I guess we didn't do that straight away because we felt, we should probably do a smaller scale project to start with. But obviously we've both worked on kind of substantially larger projects. So, whether it's buying a property to convert it into 5 flats, that's still kind of in our eyes quite small. And I guess the more you've worked on projects like that, you know exactly how to navigate planning. If it's a listed building, we're not scared of those at all. If it's an awkward, funny shaped building, that's even better for us because we can often find opportunities that are often missed by others. So I guess in a way, kind of the more difficult, more constraints type of project that actually quite suits us. And we kind of probably over the last year have had a lot of thought about that. And we thought, actually, why aren't we using our skills in the best way? And actually, there's a lot less competition for those type of projects in terms of, compared to, say, buying a terrace house. So kind of for us personally, we feel like that fits best with our skills.
Yeah, I think it's so important, isn't it, sometimes to play to your strengths. And you're helping people do this as well, aren't you, Emma? Now you've got the Pocket Architect. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because it looks like you're really helping people make the most use of space, and combining that with help with planning applications. And we know that that's a challenge for a lot of us now in the HMO industry. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I guess as our architecture company developed, we've tried to tailor our services more to property investors, and they also suit some homeowners, because we've found a lot of investors had a lot of frustrations with some architects, just common like extortionate fees, probably not understanding the actual HMO model themselves. So naturally we've tried to tailor that, and I think people come to us because we're also investors ourselves, so we can design in a way with that in mind. So the Pocket Architect feasibility study is effectively a cost-effective kind of short service to optimize the floor plans of your property. So you send us like a Rightmove link with some floor plans, or get a measured survey if you want 100% accurate drawings, and then we would look at options on how you can maximize that to your brief, because it's also quite important with some people, they really want to maximize the potential, but then they might not have a budget that aligns with the kind of work. So it kind of, I guess every project's unique. So we just try to provide that bespoke service that's quite quick turnaround. So then you can basically explore the different options and come to the best option kind of for you as an investor, because what's best for you might not be best for someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is such a useful resource for people, because I know how many times I get asked by people if I can advise on a floor plan or how to make best use of a space in a property. And sometimes that's really difficult to see. And actually, it's also difficult to know what people want to try and achieve, how they actually want that house to function. Some of our student accommodation is very different to our professional accommodation, and whether we put en suites in there is really different. And it's dead easy, I think, to get yourself tied up and confused about all the various possibilities. And sometimes when you give it to somebody like yourself, who is very analytical and understands space and functionality, it can totally transform the way that a property functions. And actually now, it's interesting because I was chatting to somebody just yesterday about this, but I think that the way that our HMOs function in terms of practicality and space is going to become more and more important over the next 5 years, as there's more competition in the market, as space standards change. I think there's going to be more legislation around minimum standards and room sizes and things like that. And we know that councils are enforcing different policies in different ways across the country. And I think ultimately tenants are going to have more choice. So I think that this is going to become so important as we look ahead. And you know me, I'm big on sustainability, particularly when we're building HMO portfolios. But I think that if we get this right, this piece about space, and it can really encourage people to stay in our houses longer, actually live more comfortably, live more cohesively. And that's so important, isn't it, when it comes to HMOs?
Definitely.
Did you apply these principles to your own HMO then, Emma, the first one that you did?
Yeah, so everything we do kind of on client projects, we obviously do on our own projects. So, but I guess in this particular property, we were quite fortunate. It was actually really large. So it's about 100 square meters, and it's a 5-bed. So I actually didn't need didn't need the layout changing that much, because I guess the first point I always start with is, are the stairs in the right position? And that's typically the most, the darkest space that doesn't have opportunities for windows, basically the least desirable place on the plan. And in this property, they are actually located in that. So that was quite fortunate, because in terms of our renovation budget, we didn't have a huge budget. And the property was, I guess, a Victorian terrace where you walk in, and the stairs are located in the centre. So it's not you walk in, the stairs are in front of you. Because it's quite large, it naturally splits the property into a large front room and a large back room. And it also has got an outrigger at ground and first. So it actually didn't need much changing. I guess one thing I always look at, not just the architecture layout, is the furniture layout. Because sometimes I think if you just look at where the walls are positioned and think, oh, that's great, I can get a 10 square metre bedroom there. But then by the time you put an ensuite in, with the ensuite door, with the door to go in, where the window is, if you've got a chimney breast, sometimes you find actually you can't get the furniture layouts to work that well. So that's something we always apply. And in this one, we needed a few clever things to work around chimney breasts. Like, for example, in the kitchen, we recessed the hob into the chimney breast. In another bedroom, we built joinery around the chimney breast so we could put the bed up against it. So it's, I guess, for us, for the design, it's not just the layout of the walls, it's also designing with in mind that you want to fit furniture in a good location for the tenants, I guess, to ensure you rent the room.
It's a great case. I mean, I'm looking at it now. And actually, you said you didn't spend that much, Emma, but you bought this property for $340,000.
Yeah.
So definitely not a cheap piece of real estate by any means. And your refurb cost was actually over $70,000, wasn't it? So possibly small for you, but actually, it's definitely what I would consider a pretty heavy refurb. Yeah. I like to do refurbs that are kind of under the 40,000 mark, quite quick. We get in, we get out. and we tend to move quite fast from one project to the next. But I do love these projects where they're more involved
Yeah.
and you're back to brick and you can really get into the fabric of the property. But this definitely was still a good sized project. And I'm looking at the pictures,
Yeah.
and you really did strip it right back to brick,
Yeah.
didn't you?
There was
And
literally nothing left inside. It was absolutely everything was gone. So,
and looking at what you did with it, and I mean these photos are on the case study, but it's incredible. The standard is phenomenal. I mean, it's sort of luxury hotel standard, really.
thank you.
And was that something that you guys had a clear action plan on? Did you know what you were trying to create, and did you know what you needed to do to achieve the certain rents and kind of numbers on the deal?
Yeah, definitely. So, kind of on all of our projects, whether it's a flip project or HMO, we always target the very top end of the market. Because obviously, as architects, that's what we like to do. We enjoy doing that. Mikkel obviously is Danish, so he's got very strong interior preference for Scandinavian design. So that actually factors into a lot of our own projects. So I guess, yeah, I suppose the interior is something we just do naturally, and we actually design to our own taste. So we want to be able to, we want to be able to live in the property if we wanted to. We want to create that nice environment. Something we're also concerned about is not designing too heavily towards taste, so that in years to come it's still relevant. I mean, this property, it's a couple of years old now, and I still look at the photos and I'm happy to be presenting rooms like that to the market. So we, I guess, try to stay clear of too obvious trends that they might look a bit dated and tired after a few years.
I'm worried that Metro tiles that we've used in so many projects, Emma, are going to be that example of what were you thinking in a few years' time. But we're going to have a big task on our hands if we have to start updating lots of our bathrooms and kitchens because Metro tiles fall out of fashion. But looking at your photos, I absolutely get what you mean. It is completely timeless what you've done, and I can see why you're hitting the top of the market there. You make it sound so easy. I mean, you're very calm and collected about this, took it all in your stride. But having done lots of projects myself and talked to lots of people, have done projects. There's usually one or two things in there that weren't quite straightforward. Was there anything on this project that stood out that was challenging, or maybe questioned whether or not you've done the right thing?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, even though we've obviously got a lot of experience between us, like like property is not easy. It's not straightforward. If you want a kind of really easy, effectively job, you wouldn't do it.
That's definitely.
So the challenge, I guess, for this property was, obviously it's located in Reading. We'd never even been to Reading before we decided we were going to buy a HMO in Reading. So we had absolutely no contacts in the area whatsoever. At the time, we lived in southwest London, so we wanted to be commutable. I guess the property was a lot cheaper, so to a certain extent we assumed labour would be equally kind of cheaper compared to London, but that was something that on this project, when we got our quotes in during the conveyancing, they were all coming in actually higher than our budget. So that was, I guess, the key challenge, which meant we went down a kind of different route to having a main contractor where we effectively acted as the main contractor and subbed out all the different trades, and that meant we could find the cheapest electrician, the cheapest plumber. Obviously, I say cheapest, but also quality. So it's really hard to find people that will deliver the quality, but actually on the budget you want. So it's really a balancing act. But then it meant through doing it that way, for example, the tiler that did the kitchen floor, we gave him a small job to start with. If he was any good, then we would expand his scope. So it meant if there was someone that wasn't that great, it meant we could kind of like, yeah, thank you, and then not give them the rest of the job. So it was definitely a lot more management involved than just getting, one builder in, but it was something with our kind of experience, and, we know what comes next in terms of sequencing trades. That's what we did to try and shave that off. And then we also did some of the work ourselves, so which we do on our own home projects, so we're comfortable doing that, whilst we're not always going to do that, because obviously it's the opportunity cost of the time that takes us. But it was something, we were happy to do in kind of evenings and weekends.
Well, I've certainly done my fair share of kind of work on the building sites. Not that I think anyone was that pleased with the quality of my work, but I was always pretty good with the broom and being able to sweep up. Sometimes, you've just got to do what you've got to do, haven't you?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and I
definitely.
think when you look at budgets, budgets can be very, very slim, and very rarely do we have, budgets that we can significantly overspend on, and particularly right now in the market, because to buy in the first instance is so expensive. So, I think there's nothing wrong with that, is there? I think we've got to
Yeah,
do what we can do, and I actually think that project managing, while it is challenging and can come with its own problems, is also a good thing for people, particularly people who want to build a business out of HMOs, maybe don't just want one or two, but have a plan to really expand their portfolio. I think getting to grips with how to run building sites and manage trades and understand where
yeah,
costs come from with trades is really important. And the only way that you develop that is to actually be on the site. And I know that that's, very much against the grain, this idea of outsourcing
yeah,
everything, and leaving it to the experts. And to some extent that's true. But I think when your product is primarily creating these sorts of products, I think as business owners, whether you're an architect or not, it's really important to understand what's happening on building sites. And one way to do that is just to roll your sleeves, get up and on site and manage the project and pull all those pieces together. So it's interesting to hear even someone of your experience and caliber still doing that, just to make sure that the project really works and that budgets
yeah,
are managed and maintained. I've got one question though, Emma. Um, how why did you decide Reading? Because it clearly wasn't a cheap
yeah,
property. Labour was still expensive. I know you said that it was commutable to London, but why Reading particularly? Because there's lots of areas around London that you
yeah,
probably could have commuted in within another 30 minutes.
yeah. So that was kind of our initial analysis. We were looking for kind of, I guess, a town that could be commutable to London. Firstly, we wanted a place that had great fundamentals and good opportunity for capital appreciation. Um, Obviously, it had Crossrail coming, which was meaning there was loads of inward investment. Um, we could get a lot more for our money than in many other areas. So it was a combination of that, and obviously the cash flow of HMOs is a big factor, but for us, kind of property is a really long-term game. So we're also looking to, if we can buy a property in a great area. I mean, this property's it's about 10-15 minute walk to the main Reading train station. It's located in not one of the cheapest areas at all. In Reading, we could have chose a cheaper area, but kind of personally, I want to feel comfortable in the area and that I could actually live there myself. So whilst the numbers might have been better in a different area, we only really want to buy to hold property that we actually really believe in, and we know, we'll be able to rent. It'll be, just a really good long-term solid investment.
I think it's so great to hear you say that, Emma, because I think this is a real sticking point for a lot of people, and particularly people based in London and the southeast, where property is really, really expensive, and there's always that draw up to the north and the
Yeah,
northwest for better returns. And there's so much more about HMOs than just the yield, just the actual cash flow. And you clearly looked at all of the factors, including the long term potential, it being sort of a manageable distance for yourselves, the local infrastructure plans, inward investment that you talked about, and it's so important, I think, to talk about. That's the stuff on the canvas that that isn't on the spreadsheet, isn't
yeah,
it? And I think it's so important and so great to hear someone like yourself talk about that, because I think we should be talking about it more. I think we are too focused on yields and
yeah,
return on capital and that cash flow figure. And actually, that isn't what makes a HMO work. What makes a HMO work is all of these different factors pulling together the long term appreciation that allows you to potentially recycle capital or reduce your debt ratio. It's the tenant supply. It's it's that kind of rising tide lifts all boats. If other things are happening in the area and the quality of tenant and housing in the area goes up, that's all going to pay dividend in the long term. But you've really got to understand an area. Did you obviously stop and research Reading before you made this commitment? You sort of committed to looking closely at Reading for various reasons and then found the properties. Is that how it worked?
So we decided obviously Reading, and then we basically just started viewing loads of properties. I do love a good spreadsheet, so I was tracking the pound per square metre in the different areas, looking at that, seeing what value, looking for properties slightly larger than others, what this property was. It was a lot larger than many on the street. And then, it was, I guess, a mixture of looking at the value versus buying in an area that we're comfortable buying in. So I guess we're not purely numbers driven at all. We are a lot driven by, we actually get a lot of kind of joy from providing homes that people love to live in. And if we can make a living from it, then that's great.
I think we're very similar in that sense. And actually, I found the best performing of my properties, Emma, have been those ones where there's more stuff going on outside the property than simply just in the property as well. There's stuff going on locally. There's amenities for young people and students and stuff as well, and combine that with a great product like yours, it's the perfect combination, isn't it? Really, for good tenants who want to stay for a long time, who are prepared to pay top rents for it because they value that product, and that really is I think that in a nutshell is what building a sustainable HMO portfolio is all about. Is ticking all of those boxes.
Yeah,
I want to pick up on something you said there. I mean, you viewed a lot of properties, and again, someone with your skills as an architect, I think the assumption from someone like myself could be that you can probably just spot this straight away, kind of beeline straight for the property that is right, and probably go ahead and buy it. But it sounds like actually, even yourself with the skills that you've got, and probably your ability to do desktop analysis, that you still had to view a lot of properties to figure out.
Yeah.
Was it whether they worked, or was it that you had to view a lot because you simply got rejected, on a lot of your offers?
Yeah. So typically, when we're doing a viewing, obviously I've already looked at the floor plans in advance. I know exactly what we would do with it, but it's more looking for things that will cost us money, if that makes sense. So cracks, if there's things that are likely asbestos. I guess it's just checking the overall structure and anything that we see that might flag up and actually be a big renovation cost. It's more kind of looking for those which you can't really appreciate on the Rightmove photos, and also getting a feel for that exact same street. So, you can do great analysis on Rightmove, but then you don't get a feel for that street. And it's more just to feel the street and check for signs of anything that will cost us a lot of money.
Absolutely. I don't think anything really beats getting on the ground, does it? And actually feeling, what that local environment is actually like. And if it's not somewhere that's local to you that you know like the back of your hand, I think that's so important. And again, one of the reasons why it is more challenging, the further away that you invest, I think, the greater that distance, the more difficult it is to go up there and spend time in that location, get to know what's happening in the local area, feel out the local area. So it's really interesting to hear you say that as well. Emma, if a lot of our listeners are doing projects like the one in your case study that need quite a lot of reconfiguration, heavy refurbishments, and for people with house skills like yours, myself included, it can be quite daunting. Where on earth do you start? And that cost piece is really a big question mark. Even if we get in and we can see the general condition, but figuring out how much it's going to cost to create floor plans that optimize the way it works, and considering planning conditions and applications that we might need to make, can be really, really overwhelming. And I think it is one of the things that unfortunately does put a lot of people off, and it certainly makes them nervous and limits what people are prepared to have a go at.
Yeah.
Where would you recommend people start? If just getting started with projects like these, and there are all these boxes to tick and considerations, what advice would you give to people to get started confidently in creating properties similar to yours?
Yeah, you've put me on the spot there, Andy. Definitely, with a great question. So I guess I'd probably, so obviously there's the floor plan option of how to optimize that. I think the way I would look at it is, I guess you have to work back from how much you're prepared to spend on the renovation from day one. Because if you haven't got the funds to do much with it, you can't really, you're not going to be able to do that much. So I guess with that in mind, I guess where I normally start with the floor plans is looking at the circulation space, and because you want to minimize that as much as possible. You want to look at the stairs, whether they're located in the right area. If they're not, where could they be? Does that enable you to create an extra room? I think the design is quite led by the circulation space. I know that seems a bit reverse because it's probably the least designed area typically, but that actually is the negative that makes the positive of the great rooms.
So the circulation space, I mean, this is a new term for me, so I'm now really interested to learn more about it. Is this the space that's kind of used to get around that?
Yeah.
Between the functional areas of the house, yeah.
So the corridor space and stairs.
Corridor space, yeah. Because the way that the placement of stairs, like you say, really can be the determining factor over the size of bedrooms and functional spaces, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. And like we've had, so some projects, they've got huge corridors at first floors that maybe wrap round, go across the plan to go back to an outrigger. And just from a simple changing of the stairs, you might be able to create a lot larger bedrooms, that more rentable, got more space for storage. I think that's something that you should always look at is the stairs. If you've got the budget, is the stairs enough?
Moving stairs isn't something that I've done a whole lot of. I've moved some, and it has usually always been quite an expensive exercise because you've got to get everything re-supported. You've got to obviously it impacts the joists on the floor and things like that, and so it is a big consideration. And I don't know what you think, Emma, but certainly from my experience, it's not something at all that I would try and do or even plan to do without really having some accurate drawings and an understanding of what's involved, including the costs as well, because that's very much into the territory of quite big refurbishments, isn't it?
I guess yes and no. So I think it's hard to say like on a generic basis because it might be that actually the way the floor joists go, you might be able to just put a few trimmers around the joists and there might not be any massive load bearing considerations. So it might be it's actually a lot cheaper than you think. But I guess if it's the other way and your stairs where it's located are surrounded by load bearing walls which need to be moved, and then yes, it could get a lot more expensive if you need to have steels in. So it's hard to say on a case to case basis, a general basis.
And I guess that's why having someone who can help you figure that out, even if that person can just tell you, no, you don't need to do that, you're probably okay without it, or you probably do need to consider this, that would be a really good and important starting point. I think especially on these projects as well, where doing the work, this amount of work, and the potential and value are really kind of delicately interlinked is so important, because if we get that value wrong, either for the refurb or the end value, it can really have quite massive consequences, can't it, about the overall performance of the investment. But I think that's one of the reasons why I would always like to get the advice and the expertise of somebody who really understands those bits, just to help mitigate the chances of either over or undershooting any plans at all, which could have massive consequences.
I completely agree kind of with that, especially because HMOs are so floor space sensitive. So if you're kind of working off a sketch over a Hans Tippex sketch over a estate agent plan, you might end up in a few problems.
Well, I've definitely made the mistake as well before of making assumptions on floor plans that we've been given by agents for properties that we've purchased about both the size and the layout, and actually found that we probably paid more than we should have because we looked at it in part on a value per square foot, and actually we were probably given some floor plans that were
Mm.
inaccurate. Also, where certain walls were, on floor plans, actually wasn't the case when we went
Yeah.
and looked closely, and that actually can have quite a big impact on the scheme that you're planning, particularly
Yeah.
if you're hoping to do something quite simple and straightforward. All of a sudden, if you find the wall's not where it should be, or even a window isn't where
Yeah.
you think it would be, then we found actually windows can be a massive problem because
Mm.
carving rooms up can sometimes be fairly straightforward, not always, but actually if you end up carving straight through the middle of a window, that's a big problem, isn't it? And then
Yeah.
of course changing a window and how that looks from the front, it is a massive problem, and sometimes simply just a problem that can't be overcome. So I think it's really important as well to make everyone aware of that, not to make too many assumptions about floor plans that you're given by agents. And if you're really planning on making substantial changes, it's
Yeah.
wise to get your own plans and probably, like you say, a measured survey even
Yeah.
done before you go about doing anything like that. I think now's probably a good time to talk about your workshop, Emma, because I'm really interested to know what you're planning for us. And actually, just talking to you today, I'm already seeing that there's loads of stuff that I don't know. I've always been really put off by moving stairs and staircases, and now I want to find out a little bit more about what I don't know about this, because I think there are lots of projects that we probably could have done better. We could
Yeah.
have probably made a better use of space, or maybe some projects that actually we could have we could have bought that we didn't think were going to quite work because we were a bit anxious about what it might cost to move stairs and stuff like that. So could you give us a little bit of a kind of a sneaky insight into what you might be planning for the workshop, Emma?
Yeah, sure. So for the workshop, it's basically going to be, I guess, effectively getting inside my head of what we would do on our own projects on HMO conversions. So I'll take you right through the kind of from the start. So getting an initial estate agent floor plan, what I would look out for, what constraints, what opportunities, and then talking through things like, positioning the staircases, throwing in some case studies of projects that we've done, so you can see the difference it can make between changing a staircase or leaving it where it is, and looking at also extending, what we look out for extensions, talking a bit about planning, loft conversions, and yeah, a load of different case studies, so you can just see some different options and see the benefits of actually sometimes changing the floor plans and optimizing them more than actually what you thought.
It sounds like there's going to be so much useful content and information in there, Emma, so I'm really looking forward to it. And guys, if you're wondering how you can get your hands on this workshop, it's inside the HMO roadmap, so it will be live. I think we're planning May, aren't we, Emma? So in May, this workshop that Emma's producing for us is going to be live, so you can go and tap into it, and it'll be a series of lessons to help you understand a lot more about all of that stuff that Emma's just been talking about. So I'm really, really, really excited about it. Emma, what does the future hold? What does Peterson Smith look like? What are you planning with your portfolio? Have you got anything in the pipeline in the next 6 months or so that we can kind of keep an eye on?
Yeah, so I guess talking probably about pipeline first. So we've got a flip project we've just completed. So that's going to go on the market this month. So that'll be good to get that one sold. Then currently we've actually not got anything going through conveyancing. So we made the decision. So I had a baby in June last year. So we thought we'd close out our kind of projects first. I'm sure you can appreciate, it's quite mental running two businesses and having a baby with no childcare in a global pandemic.
And the house you're living in is the flip as well, isn't it?
So we've made the decision to finish our own house first, because that's not quite finished, and then the second half we want to get something bought in the second half of this year, which will be a larger property to be split into flats. In terms of, I guess, our long-term portfolio is mainly to buy and hold. We've been doing a lot of flip projects recently to grow our own cash pot, but yeah, it's predominantly I guess single lets, just so the management isn't so much. as we want to spend a lot of time in Denmark and travelling abroad. And we also want to build a new build house. So after this house, we'll build our own home in the UK. And we're also going to build a summer house in Denmark. So we'll hopefully get the plot maybe the end of this year, start of next year. So hopefully exciting.
Well, definitely some really exciting projects there for us to keep an eye out. I hope your flip that's going onto the market does well. Although in the current market, I think you've got to assume that it's probably going to do quite well, because it's a pretty good time to be selling houses. It's definitely a seller's market, isn't it?
That was really great, because at the start, what estate agents valued it is way more than what our numbers were to begin with. So, and it's the top end of the market in the area. So we're really excited to get that on and see what we can get for it.
So, it's always so great when you kind of get that surprise at the end of any project, that maybe your rents are a little bit higher than you anticipated, or the value of the property is a little bit more. And for I think for 12 months or so through the COVID kind of pandemic, we've been hearing a lot about down valuations and things like that. And actually now, I suppose it depends on which side of the fence you're on at the minute. Exactly. But if you're someone who's disposing, now's a really good time. And actually, as investors, that's just as important as being able to find good quality and well-priced property as well. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? The state of the property market.
Yeah, definitely.
And we're never seem quite happy about it either, do we?
Well, it depends whether you fall in line, lucky or
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Emma, thank you so much for joining us on the HMO podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, to learn about you and your business and how you apply the principles, I suppose, of your practice to creating incredible spaces and incredible products in the HMO space. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. So it's been great.
Guys, Emma's podcast episode and the video recording will be available in the HMO roadmap, as will the case study. So you can go and learn all about Emma's HMO that she created, and all the numbers are there, and all the information about how Emma and Mikkel did that HMO is there for you to look at. And the workshop that we've talked about will be available for you in May. So I'm really excited about that, because I know it's going to be an incredible resource. Thank you again, Emma, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I will see you in the next episode.